Hello and welcome to the Time of Readiness. I'm Daria Onyshenko. We have an independent channel which is not supported by any government or organization or government. So every like and your support, donations are very, very welcome. And I'm very glad to welcome our special guest today, Steven Mur. Stephen is a former chief of staff in the US House of Representatives who has spent most of his time in Ukraine since day 5, I think, of the full-scale invasion.
Day 5, March 1.
Stephen leads the Ukraine Freedom Project, which has delivered many tons of food, medical supplies, body armor, other critical aid for the front line. Stephen is writing analytics for different medias, has produced documentary film A Face Under a Siege, documenting Russian war crimes against the Christians, showing the freedom of faith suffering under Russian aggression. And he is writing now for the Substack platform Stories from World War III, which I highly recommend everyone to look through. Welcome, Stephen.
Thanks, Daria. Great to be here.
Stephen,
you have light. I don't.
Yes, now I have. Stephen, we are doing this interview during very intense days. So much going on politically. The US drafted 28-point plan reportedly asks Ukraine to cede territorial limits, military abandon, future NATO membership. From your vantage point, how realistic or acceptable are these terms for Ukraine, practically, politically, but also morally?
Yeah, as that's written, that is a 28-point plan for Putin to invade Europe. And so it is not good for Ukraine. It's not good for Europe. It's not good for the world. It's not good for the United States of America. And so now here's the interesting thing is that there was the plan that apparently Dmitriev and Witkoff worked on in Miami at the beginning of the month. And that was leaked 3 weeks after they had those meetings. So some media is reporting that the plan that President Zelensky has is less extreme than the one that was leaked to the media, which that would be like a characteristic of Russian info op. So I think there's a lot of Russian info ops going on around this thing right now. But yeah, there's a lot in that plan that just ain't gonna work.
You know, as someone with a background in Republican political circles, given this plan seems to lean heavily in Russia's favor, as you just said, and how are US politician actors, including some Republicans, maybe stakeholders, responding internally in Washington? Do you have contact to someone in your conversations? Have you seen some willingness to negotiate or push back on some more contentious terms?
Here is the game that is being played in the White House right now. Steve Witkoff is clearly incapable of interpreting Russian words with a critical mind because he seems to just take everything the Russians say at face value. So I think he's great at real estate development, which is his career. I don't think his forte is international diplomacy. So, and then you've got Marco Rubio, who is a pro. He's a foreign policy pro, and he understands the Russian threat. And those two forces are vying for Trump's attention. And in this particular thing, this plan was not something that was run by Marco Rubio. My understanding is that Marco Rubio read about it in the media when everyone else did, or at least was not notified, very much before that. So Rubio was pushed aside on this. And so the game that is being played is who is going to get Trump's attention. Is it the pro-Russian forces or the foreign policy pros? And today the pro-Russian forces won.
Yeah, unfortunately. But as a whole, during these years you've spent in Ukraine, what arguments or evidence have you found most persuasive when trying to maintain or rebuild the support for Ukraine in the US Congress, which we can probably still use now, which probably Zelensky can use now still to make a balance on our side?
Well, I think, this is not only good messaging, but it happens to be the truth, which is that this isn't about Ukraine anymore. This is about Russia and China and Iran and North Korea all working together. And you got to put it in the American interest because, listen, I am here. I've been here since day 5 of the war. I'm living through the blackouts. I hear the Shahed drones fly by my window most nights. So, I understand. I've been to the front more than 50 times. So I stopped counting. And so, I understand what's going on here. But even I can say that the United States of America has given more money to Ukraine than it ever has to any country in the history of America. So that is a lot of money to Americans, and I think that there's that sort of pressure that Republicans are feeling, and it's so it is not about Ukraine. It can't be about Ukraine. It's got to be about global stability. It's got to be that China is helping Russia. North Korean troops are in Russia to learn what's happening with drone warfare, to figure out how to go, so the North Koreans, they want to go into Taiwan. And if they get the sort of drone capabilities that the Russians have, that's going to really aid them in that effort. Xi Jinping wants to go into Taiwan. And, having Russia do this now is a blessing to Xi Jinping. So I think the focus needs to be on, and I don't just think this is in the data. So we poll Americans, we poll Republicans, we do a sociological survey to find out what they think about Ukraine. And, 92% of Republican voters are concerned about Russian drones going into Poland and Finland and Denmark. That frightens people. You can't get 92% of Republicans to agree on what time it is. And so, so this is a very strong thing. 74% of American voters, Republican voters, think that this could happen in America, that Russian or Chinese drones could attack America. And it is. We're in a global war. There's shooting wars in the Middle East and Europe, and the rest of us are in a global information war. And the more that Zelensky can tie this to the global war in which America is participating, I think the more he's going to get the attention of people in the White House and people around the White House.
Yeah, I think that one of the more controversial elements is a proposed constitutional ban on Ukraine joining NATO, yes, and the cap on troop strengths. What we see now in Europe, finally, most of the politicians start talking about Europe getting stronger, getting its military stronger, and understanding that the threat of Russian invasion into Europe is getting realistic. What the Americans think about this, and what role should now play Europe in those negotiations?
Yeah, Europe has lost a lot of credibility because they're funding both sides of this war. Belgium holds 170 billion or thereabouts dollars worth of frozen Russian assets. And all they've done with them is tax them. The Belgians have taken $3 billion of that money as tax. They've not sent much of it all to Ukraine. And in fact, the Belgians every day buy enough liquid natural gas from Russia to fund 71 Shahed drones flying into Ukraine and killing civilians. So, Europe is, Macron talks really tough on Putin, and he talks and he keeps talking. Spain is another country that sends far more money to Russia for LNG than they do to Ukraine for its defense. And so if Europe wants to be a player, they need to play. And so to be fair, they have sent, United States of America sent almost no money to Ukraine this year, and Europe has sent all the money. Now the question is, I don't know how that's counted. Does that mean that is that money? This is the Kiel? There's a. You familiar with the Kiel Institute out of Germany? They track donations to Ukraine. So this is what they say. They say that Europe has sent all the money this year to Ukraine. So they are getting active, but they're far away from being a player in any way, shape, or form.
But Russian propaganda is speaking also more and more openly about invading European countries like Estonia, Poland, countries located close
Finland.
to the border. Yeah. What happens if now this conflict in Ukraine will be frozen? It will give a chance to the Russia to get stronger and stronger, to get more and more drones, and make this invasion in European countries sooner possible.
Yeah. So, as you know, and I know, and every Ukrainian knows, how do you tell if Putin's lying? His lips are moving. And so, I did a search. I got a list of all the peace agreements that Putin entered into, and then I actually, this is a ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT, give me a list of all the peace agreements that he has upheld, and there's one, and that was there. Arguably, he has held his end of the bargain in the Armenia-Azerbaijan war. But even then, that's like, really? Is it really? So Putin does not uphold peace agreements. He does not want peace. It's not like Putin's going to go back to making televisions. Russia doesn't make televisions. They don't make cars that are worth anything. They don't make computers to any large degree. So there is no one in America who has like gone back to their home, looked at something looked at the bottom of it and said, "Made in Russia." There is nobody in America has anything made in Russia in their house. So, Putin does not want peace. Putin's economy, digs things out of the ground: gas, oil, gold, diamonds, rare earth minerals, and they produce weapons of war. The AK-47 is the most prolific weapon of mass destruction in the history of man. And so that's what Putin does. So to think that he's going to go back to like, oh, great, we can, Putin's going to go tend to his gardening and the Russian economy is going to flourish with consumer goods is a nonsense thing to think about. What's going to happen is he's going to get a break, and he is currently paying. Do you know how much he's paying his soldiers? Have you ever heard this? So Putin is paying his soldiers twice in cash what an American entry-level soldier would get. So they're getting more than $4,000 a month to come fight in Ukraine. And now if you think about that in purchasing power parity terms, that's so he's getting twice in cash what an American gets, and the Russian average monthly wage is 5 times that of America. So, Putin is paying his soldiers 10 times what an American soldier makes. And then the death benefits are in excess of $100,000. If Putin does not have to spend that money anymore, he'll just go to making more drones and missiles, and then in a year or two, he'll either go back to Ukraine or attack Finland or both. And so what's happening here is we are allowing one of the arsenals, along with China, Iran, North Korea, to build itself stronger and attack people more effectively. That's what's happening here.
Yeah, this plan is said to have been drafted in close consultation with Russian officials, but without involving actually Ukraine from the very beginning, as it already happened before a few times when Trump was trying to negotiating with Putin alone. How does it affect its legitimacy now in the eyes of Ukrainians? Like, what do you hear now from Ukrainians, especially those on the front line? What are Ukrainians saying about this? Ukrainian President Zelensky has called this yesterday in his speech to the nation as a moment of difficult choice, like standing up for Ukrainian dignity or preserving US support. Yeah. And how do you see this trade-off? Like, what are the risks for Ukraine if it rejects to accept the points of this plan and loses the support of US at the end?
Well, I'm a student of history. When I came here and started helping Ukraine, particularly when I started doing this work communicating with Republicans, I started reading books about Winston Churchill. I read several books. I watched a bunch of movies, documentaries, and because I wanted to find out what Winston Churchill did during World War II to bring the American President Roosevelt, into the war. He's in the same position. He was in the same position that Zelensky's in. We need American weapons. How do we get more American weapons? And so Winston Churchill was incredibly dedicated to this. And his 20-year-old daughter-in-law was named Pamela. Pamela Churchill went on to be named Pamela Harriman and became a very famous woman. But she was married to Winston Churchill's son. And while Winston Churchill's son, Randolph, was off in Egypt, some would say fighting, some would say drinking heavily. By all accounts, Randolph was sort of a scoundrel. But while Winston Churchill's son was gone, he encouraged his daughter-in-law to have affairs with American generals, with American diplomats, and she did. And she would get up out of bed with an American general. She would go to number 10 Downing Street, and she would tell Winston Churchill what she learned, and Winston Churchill would use it to get America more interested in the war. And it forever changed. It destroyed his relationship with his son. But that was the level of commitment that Winston Churchill had to get weapons for England. And, here in Ukraine, President Zelensky can't get one of his best friends to stop stealing money from the fund that goes to protect electrical infrastructure in Ukraine. So right now you've got, President Trump with the executioner's axe, but it was an open secret this level of corruption was happening. And so this is something that was going to happen. It was a foreseeable problem, and it's a bad problem. And it makes Ukraine look bad in America, in Europe. And, and so my American friends who said, how much money did we spend in Ukraine? And $100 million, is that how much went to Zelensky's friends? And it kills support among everyday Americans for Ukraine. And again, this was a foreseeable problem. And so that's the problem I have, is that there's a bunch of people. You'd ask, like, what's the Republican reaction to this? And nobody likes it. Nobody likes this plan. But everyone is also super frustrated because everyone is super frustrated because everybody's been pulling for Zelensky. Everybody's been putting themselves on the line for Ukraine, and this level of corruption comes out, and so that's the hard thing to understand.
But do you think this is a coincidence that this corruption plan comes out now? Or even if it does, do you think that Americans can take it as an opportunity together with Russians to make pressure on Zelensky regarding the plan?
I think there's a very good chance this is a Russian information operation, because it's also being there's the Russian Orthodox Church is spending several weeks right now in Washington, D.C., saying that Zelensky persecutes Christians, which is, as we know, is nonsense. So no, this is not a coincidence. This was a vulnerability that was not addressed. So this is like, going to war and not having anyone on the line between, Bakhmut and Pokrovsk, right? And so you have this big open gap that's waiting to be exploited. And it was exploited. And it was easily avoidable. I don't know what it would take to get Mendich to stop stealing, but that needed to happen. And to Americans and Europeans, it says that Zelensky and it may not be Zelensky, maybe it's Yermak, I don't know. But it says the Zelensky administration is not serious about protecting their country. So it sends a very bad message, and it may well be an information operation. But you can't fight a war like this by having your hands in the cookie jar and expecting people to send you money.
Yeah, that's true. Some analysts also warn now that the proposal could effectively freeze the front lines in regions like Zaporizhia or Kherson, turning active battle lines into de facto new borders. Yes, what would be the human resource, humanitarian implications of such freeze for civilian, for military populations? Is it something that the Ukrainians are ready now to go for, or is it something that is unacceptable under any conditions? And what role do you think, what choice will Zelensky need to take?
Well, I think that at this point, freezing the lines where they are right now doesn't sound unreasonable. I mean, it sucks. I mean, I don't like it. I've got friends at the front. Like I said, I've been there a whole bunch of times. Every Ukrainian, has made sacrifices for this, except perhaps for Mindich.
Yeah.
And so this is not a good outcome. But there's also, and I think that if we can get this peace negotiation, and listen, there's a long list of things that have to happen to make this peace negotiation real. But I think that the way to make this better is to make sure that Ukraine is well armed, well supported. I mean, there's a line in there saying that the territorial integrity of Ukraine will be respected, or something. That sounds a lot like the Budapest Memorandum from 1994, right? So Ukraine can't sign something, that says, "Oh yeah, you'll be okay. Just trust us." That has not worked out well for Ukraine. So, so that is, that's so that I think that getting that frozen line there is not the worst outcome. It's North Korea, South Korea. And it's a real shame for the people that still live in Donetsk and Luhansk. I was in, so I do a lot of videos, and I was in Slavyansk a couple months ago, and I just started asking people. I was like, Slavyansk is one of those parts of Donetsk that we've given up, that has not been taken by the Russians. So this is when Steve Witkoff says, "Oh, it's just a strip of land in Donetsk," this is it, Slavyansk. And so I started asking people, what do you think? Do you want to be, live under Russian rule? No, I don't. I said, "Oh, come on, it's just a strip of land." And people will get mad. It's like, people liked me until I said that. So.
I know what you're talking about. I've been shooting a movie in Slavyansk 2019 already, and I know that.
Oh yeah,
they were already part of Donbas occupied. It's a movie, a feature film about occupied territories in Donbas.
Send me that. I would love to see that.
I'll do that.
Slavyansk is a cool city. There's a doctor. He had to evacuate now, but there was a doctor there that for years that we helped, and we brought him a car. The Russians blew up his car and his hospital in the summer, and so we got him a new car and took him the car, and couldn't do much about the hospital. But amazing man. All he does is operate on Ukrainian soldiers and save their lives. That's it. It's like I text him. I was like, "Hey, doc, how's it going?" And he will just send me photos of his latest surgery.
Nice.
That's all he has to talk about. So, and I love that guy. So, but it would be a shame if Slavyansk was part of Russia now.
Yeah, that's where I would like to come back to you personally. You have spent nearly the entire war inside of Ukraine. What experiences most shaped your understanding of this conflict, or how to say it? What continues to motivate you to remain on the ground, delivering aid, helping, challenging under such dangerous conditions while attacks are getting stronger and stronger?
Well, it started out, I just had some Ukrainian friends, still have a lot of Ukrainian friends, but I had a bunch of Ukrainian friends. I loved Ukraine. I lived here for a year in 2018, 2019, thought it was super cool. And, Ukrainians are hardworking, they're entrepreneurial. Everyone in this country is better at math than I am. And so they're super smart, and they're creative, and just, it's what I liked about Ukraine when I lived here before was everything I liked about being an American. And now add to that, it's an amazing fight for freedom. And so I got here and I was like, wow. So freedom is one of my core values. And I spent a lot of time in the Middle East in Muslim countries after 9/11, after September 11th, 2001. And so I spent several years in and out of Muslim countries trying to help them figure out how to solve their problems using words rather than guns and bombs. And so I got a tattoo of the Arabic word for freedom on my leg. Now I have a tattoo of the trezub stylized to look like vola on my other leg. So so I'm here because this is the greatest fight for freedom in my lifetime, and I'm proud and honored to be a part of it. And so that is a big chunk of my motivation. And then also, since I've been here, I've recognized, again, this is no longer about Ukraine. This is about a global war. And, America is in a global war right now. They're in the information part, on the information front. And, my friends at home are scrolling Instagram while the Russians and the Chinese are figuring out how to kill them. And so part of what I'm doing is I'm trying to tell America to wake up, do the right thing. You're in a war. Russians are not nice people. Don't trust them. They want to kill you. They've said it many times. And so now, and there's such a flood of Russian propaganda in Ukraine, America, and everywhere else, Europe, and I've spent most of my life, in campaigns. So in a political campaign. So I am really good at changing public opinion. And it's easier about what's going on in Ukraine because, the Russians lie. We have the truth on our side and the truth still works. So, so it's actually the campaign is easier. You can make the case easier. Now, the Russians have spent somewhere between 1.6 and $2.4 billion annually on propaganda worldwide. So it's tough. They've got all the resources and we got like nothing compared to that. So, so that's tough. But, again, you got the truth on your side. It's an easier sell.
You were talking before about the influence of the Russian Orthodox Church now in the propaganda campaigns, and you did a documentary film about this. Why or how do you think is the role of the Russian Orthodox Church in this war underestimated? Are the Americans also aware of how it works? What was their intention about making this movie?
Yeah. So let me tell you on my journey on that is that I'm a Christian, and I came to Ukraine to help. And at the end of 2022, I was in a co-working facility here in Kyiv, and this guy comes to me and says, "Hi, my name is Victor. I'm an evangelical Christian." All right, dude. People don't say that in America. So I'm like, "What you got?" And Victor tells me, I was a volunteer in Luhansk in 2014 when the Russians invaded, and I started taking groups out of Luhansk. And one day I was taking a group that included a pregnant woman and a newborn infant, and the Russians stopped my truck, pulled me out of my truck, and took me to the basement. And you know what that means. But, Americans don't know what that means. He was tortured. He was taken to a torture prison, right? He was tortured in prison. And so, including one day when he was praying with his cellmate, and a Russian Orthodox priest walked by and said, "You're not Orthodox, are you?" And Victor, of course, says, "No, I'm an evangelical Christian." So the guards pulled him out and took him to the torture room, strapped him to a chair, and tased him with electricity while the Russian Orthodox priest tried to cast demons out of him for being an evangelical Christian. And, and Christians, evangelical Christians in America are like, 30% of the population and 60% of the Republican voters. So they're a very powerful force. And I thought if they knew this, it would blow their minds. And, and shortly after that, I heard Tucker Carlson say, and Tucker Carlson is a very famous, very influential conservative influencer, Tucker's saying, yeah, Zelensky's persecuting Christians. And I'm like, man, I live in Kyiv. I'm not seeing that, So so it really motivated me to tell people the truth. And so I've been, since roughly summer of 2023, I've been telling Republicans, conservatives, Christians in America the truth about what's happening. Who's doing the persecution of Christians? It's all the Russians. Yeah. So the Ukrainians don't have time to persecute Christians. They're fighting a war with the Russians. So and as you know, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, with the Moscow Patriarch, they're essentially a spy network, and not all those folks are bad folks. No, so not all the clergy of the UOC MP are collaborators, but all the clergy of any religion that are collaborators are from that church. And there's more than 100 of them, and probably more. Probably that has been underestimated. So, so it's important for Americans to know that Kirill, Patriarch Kirill, has declared a holy war on Ukraine and the West. Patriarch Kirill has told Russians that if you die fighting in Ukraine, all your sins will be washed away. And he stopped sort of offering 72 virgins, but it's the same thing that the Islamic extremist groups do. And Americans need to understand that.
Stephen, we're running a bit out of time. That's why I asked my last question. You are writing for a Substack platform, calling your blog Stories from the World War III. Are we now in the World War III?
Tales from World War III. And let me do a little bit of self-promotion. Stephen Mur, Steven Moore.Substack.com, Tales from World War III. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yes, so the question is, are we now in the World War III?
Well, that's a question for historians. When did World War III start? Will it be in 2014 when the Russians invaded Ukraine the first time? Will it be 2022? Or will it be when President Biden did such a terrible job of evacuating Afghanistan that it emboldened Putin to invade Ukraine? So people will be discussing that for decades to come. What I do know is that we are in a global war. Russia's being sort of supported by China, and Russia works with Iran, or what's left of Iran. Those Shahed drones are Iranian made, and after October 7th, in the first place that Hamas leadership went was Moscow, and then Putin held a summit meeting in February after the 2024, after October 7th, of all the Islamic extremist groups. So North Korea is sending soldiers to Ukraine, and then you got Venezuela, hangers on, and Cuba, both of them sending men here, and so it would not be surprising to me if the narco traffickers were also involved in this. So there is a global effort. And America thinks that peace and prosperity is its birthright, and it's not. The last 70 years of relative peace in the world is an anomaly. Typically, every 20 to 30 years, there's a terrible war that kills off some large percentage of the population. And so it is we're historical anomaly. So this is unusual by a historical perspective, and that we haven't been at war. And we're here. We need to do something about it.
Stephen, thank you so much. It was my big pleasure talking to you today, and I admire really so much people like you, foreigners who come to Ukraine, who stay in Ukraine and help us in this so hard time. Thank you again.
Daria, super fun to hang out with you. Thanks for making the time.